I'm Tom, and this is Cheri. And just like last week, we are going to do a 3-day series as a follow-up to the sermon that I preached this last Sunday. We're going through a series in our sermons about similarities we see between the days when the Israelites had their exodus from Egypt through their 40-year wilderness wanderings into the Promised Land, comparing that to what we've been experiencing here in America in the last 4 months or so with all of the COVID-19 and those type of things. One of the things that we saw of similarities, what I talked about in yesterday's sermon, was at that time when Israel was on the road, they had a census. In fact, they had two. Okay, would that be censuses or censi? Censi. Okay, I'm not sure what that would be, but they had two. And we're right now in America in 2020 having a census this year.
Yes, we are. Did you fill out your census form?
Well,
did you fill out your census?
I filled out our census form. Yes, I did. So today we're going to talk more about the census. And yesterday in the sermon I talked about the first census. This was going to be more about the second one.
Okay.
Before we actually start that, we need to lead into it a little bit in Numbers. We're in Numbers chapter 25. So if you have your Bible, Numbers chapter 25, this is actually the tail end of the story in the Old Testament on Balaam. All right? And so we're in chapter 25. And Cheri, I want you to read chapter 25. I'll tell you when to stop, okay?
All right, here we go. Numbers 25. While Israel lived in Shittim, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel yoked himself to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, "Take all the chiefs of the people and hang them in the sun before the Lord, that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel." And Moses said to the judges of Israel, "Each of you kill those of his men who have yoked themselves to Baal of Peor." And behold, one of the people of Israel came and brought a Midianite woman to his family in the sight of Moses and in the sight of the whole congregation of the people of Israel, while they were weeping in the entrance of the tent of meeting. When Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, saw it, he rose and left the congregation and took a spear in his hand and went after the man of Israel into the chamber and pierced both of them, the man of Israel and the woman, through her belly. Thus the plague on the people of Israel was stopped. Nevertheless, those who died by the plague were 24,000.
Okay, now I want you to jump down a little bit. Go down to verse number 14, if you would.
The name of the slain man of Israel, who was killed with the Midianite woman, was Zimri, the son of Salu, chief of a father's house belonging to the Simeonites. And the name of the Midianite woman who was killed was Cosbi, the daughter of Zur, who was the tribal head of a father's house in Midian.
Okay, so that is some background information. I wanted you to read through that because that may play a role in what we're going to look at in a moment here in the census, the second census of Israel. Okay? So if you would, go ahead and start reading at chapter number 26 of Numbers.
After the plague, the Lord said to Moses and to Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, "Take a census of all the congregation of the people of Israel, from 20 years old and upward, by their fathers' houses, all in Israel who are able to go to war." And Moses and Eleazar the priest spoke with them in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho, saying, "Take a census of the people from 20 years old and upward, as the Lord commanded Moses." The people of Israel who came out of the land of Egypt were a whole bunch of people and names.
Yeah, and so we're going to go through there are a lot of names, and I want to just jump in for a second and say this. First of all, the purpose of the census, okay, was they able to get everybody's name on a list according to their families, their tribes, their clans, so that once they entered the Promised Land, the names on those lists, those men and their wives, okay, assuming they were married, and they probably mostly were, they're going to receive a piece of property, an inheritance in the land. Now we remember yesterday from the on Sunday from the message we looked at that there was also a list and had 12 names on it at the first census back in Numbers chapter 1, but because the people rebelled, what happened to all 12 of those men who were listed in that list?
They died.
All of them died in the wilderness wanderings, okay, because they rebelled against the Lord. So here we're almost at the end of the travels, 39 or whatever years later, and we are having to do a second census to get a new group of people on that list, okay? Now, why don't you go ahead and go. I want you to just jump down. We're in chapter 26. I want you to read just verses, I believe, 13 and 14. Or sorry, 12, 13, and 14. Right. Yeah.
The sons of Simeon, according to their clans of Nemuel, the clan of the Nemuelites, of Jamin, the clan of the Jaminites, Of Jachin, the clan of the Jachinites. Of Zerah, the clan of the Zerahites. Of Shaul, the clan of the Shaulites. These are the clans of the Simeonites, 22,200.
So 22,200. Now, if you would, I've got a paper clipped here for you. I want you to jump back to Numbers chapter 1 during the first census, and I want you to read from chapter 1, just verses 22 and 23.
All right. Of the people of Simeon, their generations, by their clans, by the fathers' houses, those of them who were listed, according to the numbers of names, head by head, every male from 20 years old and upward, all who were able to go to war, those listed of the tribe of Simeon were 59,300.
Okay, so look at that number you just read. In chapter 1, how many men ages 20 and up were there in that census that was taken?
59,300.
59,300. We get to the end of the wilderness wanderings, men 20 years old and upward. What's the number now?
22,200.
22,200. What? It's a tremendous drop
They
here.
lost quite a few.
59.3 down to 22.2. All right. We look at that number. This is over half of their number is gone. 60% of their male population is of 20 or older is gone. We don't know if this is the case, but it might be that when we look at the story of Baal, at the worship of Baal at Peor, the Peor, we looked at Numbers chapter 25. It said that the man who had committed that sin with the Midianite woman was from the tribe of Simeon, all right? And we see the plague back up in verse number 9 of chapter 25. How many were lost from that plague?
24,000.
24,000. So it might be that the Simeonites were greatly at fault in this sin, and so that tremendous drop might have been, connected with that Simeonite man, and maybe a lot of those 24,000 were from that tribe as well. Now, again, we don't know all the other numbers of that tribe. All we know is those men 20 and older. So there could be a lot of women and children that aren't in that 22,200 number that are in fact, added as well. But again, just those men, big drop. Okay. Now I want you to jump over, if you would please, to verse number 57. Just the first part of 57 of chapter 26.
This was a list of the Levites according to their clans.
Okay, so you got a bunch of names and other information. And then go down, please, to verse number 62.
And those listed were 23,000.
Okay.
Every male, I'm going to keep reading.
Keep going.
Every male from a month old and upward. For they were not listed among the people of Israel, because there was no inheritance given to them among the people of Israel.
Right. So the Levites, one difference from them and the other tribes of Israel, the Levites are not given like a regional, a tribal area, a region for their tribe, a property. Instead, they are the Levitical priesthood. The Lord is their inheritance. And so what would happen is the Levites would actually get cities scattered throughout those other regions where the tribes were represented in those different areas. So the Levites had a different inheritance land, placement than the other tribes did.
Sure.
Now, if you would read on the rest of the chapter, starting verse number 63.
These were those listed by Moses and Eleazar the priest, who listed the people of Israel in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho. But among these there was not one of those listed by Moses and Aaron the priest, who had listed the people of Israel in the wilderness of Sinai. For the Lord had said of them, they shall die in the wilderness. Not one of them was left, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun.
Right, and so this is interesting here because all those men died in the wilderness except two people.
Caleb and Joshua.
Caleb and Joshua, the only ones that were over 20 who made it all the way through and are going to get to go in the promised land. I just want to point out here that Caleb and Joshua did not rebel. Way back when they sent the spies out, they were 2 of the 12 spies, spy out the promised land. They didn't rebel. They said, we can do this, we can do it. They didn't die in the wilderness wanderings, and the Lord rewards faithfulness. And these men were faithful to the Lord, and God rewards them with the opportunity to enter the promised land. We know Joshua will actually be the one that takes over to lead God's people once Moses dies. All right.
And that's how we named our oldest Caleb, after this Caleb.
That's right, this Caleb right here. Now, I want to go on a little bit more into chapter 27 because the census is taken, but there's a little bit of a problem that arises with the census, a unique situation, an exception of sorts. So if you begin reading in chapter 27 of Numbers.
All right. Then drew near the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, son of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, from the clans of Manasseh, the son of Joseph. The names of his daughters were Malal, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. And they stood before Moses and before Eleazar the priest and before the chiefs and all the congregations at the entrance of the tent of meeting, saying, Our father died in the wilderness. He was not among the company of those who gathered themselves together against the Lord in the company of Korah, but died for his own sin. And he had no sons. Why should the name of our father be taken away from his clan because he had no son? Give to us a possession among our father's brothers. Moses brought their case before the Lord. And the Lord said to Moses, The daughters of Zelophehad are right. You shall give them a possession of an inheritance among their father's brothers, and transfer the inheritance of their father to them. And you shall speak to the people of Israel, saying, If a man dies and has no son, then you shall transfer his inheritance to his daughter. And if he has no daughter, then you shall give his inheritance to his brothers. And if he has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to his father's brothers. And if his father has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to the nearest kinsman of his clan, and he shall possess it. And it shall be for the people of Israel a statute and rule, as the Lord commanded Moses.
So we have this exception here, and they come up, this group of girls, these sisters come up before Moses. Okay, we get the idea of the census and everything's going on here, but this is kind of a little known story about the census. We don't talk about census too much, but what would happen is most families had sons that replaced the sons that were on that original list of 12 from the first census who had died in the wilderness. All right, but this man, what was his name again?
Zelophehad.
Yeah. Okay. Say that one 12 times. All right, real fast. All right. So this man didn't have any sons; he had only daughters. All right, and therefore this family would not have a son listed in the new census because you didn't have any. All right. Well, the daughters explain, "Hey, this really isn't fair here. Okay." Our family won't get any property because what's going to happen is we're going to get married ourselves, and we're going to be absorbed then into those other families we marry into here. We think that since our dad was not one of the rebels with Korah's rebellion and stuff, that our dad's name should still receive the honor, be honored, and given some property here. Well, Moses gets this case and he says, okay, you know what, I better talk to the Lord about this. And so we see here in the passage that Moses goes before the Lord and talks, and it says here, again in verse number 7, verse 6, the Lord said to Moses, the daughters of
Zelophehad,
there you go, are right. All right, you shall give them possession of an inheritance among their father's brothers and transfer the inheritance of their father to them. And so these young ladies, these daughters, they then, are able to win this case. I don't know if I call it that exactly, but this request here. This is significant because keep in mind that when they get in the promised land, all the land ultimately belongs to who?
To God.
To God, right? Ultimately belongs to God. But what's going to happen here is, every 50 years, if some of the Israelites leased out part of their property to others, at the end of every 50 years is the year of
Jubilee.
Jubilee, exactly. So what happens then is at the end of the 50 years, in that year of Jubilee, all the land reverts back to the family that it belongs to, that it goes back to. And so what will happen is, the family, if they lease out their land, it goes back to their same family here again. And he even leaves the allotment of, well, if you don't have any daughters, then it goes to this guy. If you don't have one of them, it goes to this guy.
And it all figured out.
They do. And so in the future, all similar cases will going to be handled like this one was. Okay? And so what's going to happen is, the ultimate goal here is that no family's tree should just cease to exist down the line from here on out. All right. What I want to point out here is just this fact that at this time in history, we think about it being a very patriarchal society. The man leads, but in this case, this group of sisters came up and said, there isn't a brother, there's no man. The Lord honors that request, and He grants this fact and says, you know what? They said it's not fair. We're going to give them land. If people say, Christianity is belittling to women, they don't receive, the status of men, keep in mind that the Lord is fair in this. He steps up and say, no, you know what? The girls are right here. Let's grant them land. grant them land. Okay.
He listens to the women.
He did. He listened to him. It was the right thing to do, and of course, God does the right thing, right? All the time. So, a lot of information about the census, more than I normally talk about censuses or censi or whatever they are. Yeah. Tomorrow we're going to be back, and we're going to talk more about some things that I shared in Sunday's sermon. We'll see you then.
See you later.